Welcome back to The Explainer. Look, I am absolutely pumped to get into this material today because we're tackling something that is literally hardwired into our daily lives. We're going to use our own biological systems to figure out exactly why we keep repeating bad habits and, way more importantly, how to physically rewire your brain to stop them in their tracks. So if you've ever felt totally trapped by your own behaviors, well, you're exactly where you need to be. It's a universal frustration, isn't it? Knowing exactly what we should be doing, knowing the right path, but somehow still finding ourselves stuck in this endless impulse loop anyway. It's super common to just write this off as a failure of character or, a lack of willpower. But here's the real kicker we're exploring today. It's actually driven by your biology. So here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll dive into the biology of habits. Then we'll look at the alcohol hijack. And finally, we'll break down the plasticity super protocol. All right, section 1, the biology of habits and how the brain is actually set up. Now, before we even think about breaking habits, we have to talk about neuroplasticity. You probably already know it's the nervous system's ability to physically and functionally change in response to experience. But I really want you to let this sink in. This is the literal cellular substrate of your habits. Your behavior is actively, literally remodeling the synapses in your brain. You aren't just forming some abstract habit, you are physically changing your brain's architecture every single time you act. Basically, you've got two main players constantly battling it out in your head. On the left, we've got the prefrontal cortex. Think of this as the CEO of your brain. It provides what scientists call top-down inhibition. In plain English, it's your brakes. It's the part of you that stops you from saying something tactless or grabbing that third croissant when you know you aren't actually hungry. But on the right, battling against it are your habit circuits. These are deep-seated connections constantly running on autopilot. They act as the accelerator, letting you do things you already know how to do without burning any mental energy. And that brings us to the crucial point, the double-hit loop problem. This is where things get really wild. Every time you give in to an impulsive behavior, you're actually doing two biological things at the exact same time. First, you're growing more synapses, those literal physical connection points, in your habit circuits, making them stronger. Second, and honestly worse, you're simultaneously reducing the synapses in the control circuits that are supposed to manage that behavior. The result? You are slamming your foot on the accelerator while literally cutting your own brake lines. No wonder habits feel harder to break the more you do them. Moving on to section 2, the alcohol hijack and shifting baselines.
Okay, most of us get the first part of this. Alcohol shuts down the prefrontal cortex while you're drinking, right? That's why we get super impulsive in the moment. But here is the massive paradigm shift. For regular users, and yeah, the science shows this includes people just having a few drinks on the weekends, it actually modifies your brain circuits to be more impulsive even when you are completely sober. Your biological baseline has shifted. You've effectively trained your brain to be less controlled and more habitual, literally all the time.
Which brings us to section 3. The plasticity super protocol and how we actually break this loop. So if your brain's brakes are damaged or, prune away, how on earth do we fix them? Well, our first major tool is protocol 1, the abstinence reset. Let's walk through this because it's a very specific biological process. First, identify the impulsive habit loop. Then, commit to 2 to 6 months of total abstinence. Now listen, this isn't just a test to see how tough your willpower is. It's a biological necessity. It literally takes this specific window of time to allow those overgrown dominant habit synapses to finally prune back. By starving those bad connections, you give your CEO, your prefrontal cortex, the time it desperately needs to rebuild that top-down control. Next up is Protocol 2, Time-Restricted Feeding, or TRF. Now, I know most people think of intermittent fasting purely as a tool for weight loss, right? But it is actually phenomenal no-go basal ganglia brain training. We're leveraging your daily feeding schedule to physically exercise and rebuild your brain's impulse control. Let's contrast how this actually looks in your circuitry. On one side, you have go behaviors. Think eating on impulse, or constantly trying to negotiate portion control with yourself. That internal back and forth, it is metabolically and cognitively exhausting. It completely drains you. On the flip side, we have no-go behaviors. This means setting a strict unbending rule, like waiting until a noon feeding window opens. Every single time you feel a ping of hunger at 10 a.m., but you decide to wait until noon, you're practicing a no-go behavior. You are literally taking your prefrontal cortex to the gym. It is so much easier for your brain to just follow a strict no-go rule than to constantly engage in the exhausting negotiation of a go behavior. But to truly lock in this neuroplasticity over the long haul, we have to talk about identity shift. You have to quote-unquote kill your clone daily. What does that mean? It means recognizing that your old habits belong to a past version of yourself that you are actively choosing to stop feeding. You just can't create a new, disciplined, high-performing version of yourself while trying to drag your old clone's habits behind you like some heavy anchor. It'll just pull you right back into the loop. And that brings us to this fantastic point from Dr. Lane Norton. There are no solutions, only trade-offs. It's a harsh but incredibly empowering reality to accept. If you want a more disciplined, high-performing brain, the trade-off is that you have to embrace the short-term discomfort of doing the hard thing today. You're trading the momentary comfort of giving into an impulse for the long-term biological power of real neurological control. So, I'll leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on. Which no-go behavior are you going to practice this week to strengthen your prefrontal cortex? What specific impulse are you going to say no to today to start physically rebuilding your brain's brakes? Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep leveraging the science, and go take control of your biology.